how do we organize for change? With apologies to Oscar Wilde, I'm stealing the title of one of his famous books, and I'm just going to change it slightly. I'm going to drop off the word earnest, and I'm going to add the word present. So I'm going to talk about just the importance of being present. The NFU, following the lead of our parent provincial organizations, has always been striving to change the conversation, to bring new information to the table. And it was rooms full of NFU members just like this that caused the prairie wheat pools to be formed pretty much exactly 100 years ago. Farmers Union of Saskatchewan members voted to invite a young Jewish California lawyer up from California to talk about the benefits of cooperation. That one act was pivotal in creating the Manitoba wheat pool, Saskatchewan wheat pool, Alberta wheat pool, and by the time the Saskatchewan wheat pool was, you can insert whatever word you want, by the time they committed suicide or by the time those assets were stolen by the corporate Canada, they had to not only delivered a service to prairie grain farmers, but they had put cash back in the pockets of those farmers. By the early 1990s, they had contributed back in cash dividends more than $500 million over that time frame. We can't talk too much about that or I'll run out of time. Again, the same people created the Canadian Wheat Board, and the Wheat Board put billions of dollars back into farmers' pockets. And there's at least one other guy in this room who served on the board of Canadian Wheat Board. He was there before I got there, but Kyle Kornichuk is sitting over there with his back up against the wall. Supply management. Groups of NFU farmers just like this were pivotal in creating supply management in Canada. At the time I joined the board, there was just tremendous success in stopping the introduction of bovine growth hormone into Canadian dairy herds. That you can argue that would not have happened without the National Farmers Union and one of the very first websites we ever had that the Farmers Union ever put up. And if you go to the Wayback Machine, you can look at those old websites. They store billions and billions and billions. They've archived billions and billions and billions of snapshots of websites. You can actually go back and look at the old NFU websites. We were the organization that built the largest coalition of farm groups and civil society organizations to work against the introduction of Roundup Ready wheat. That was exactly 20 years ago, and we were successful. Monsanto, we were not successful in convincing the government. The government always tells you, oh, if you farmers would just get together, you know, and speak with one voice, we would pretty much do whatever you said. Well, that's wrong. We created the largest coalition that had ever existed, and we did not convince the government to take action. But Monsanto withdrew their application. That was 20 years ago. So how did the NFU accomplish so much? We did it by changing the conversation, by being present. So a couple of these pictures have me in the picture, but I want to stress this is not just about me. There have been hundreds, if not thousands, of NFU members over the years that have been doing these same kind of things, whether they're representing Canadian farmers in international and it was a tremendous success. Britain was actually doing something that we were asking for from the Canadian government, which was to have an actual public consultation about genetic modification. They did it in their House of Commons, they did it with members of the public. It was brilliant. This is here in front of Parliament Hill. You wouldn't recognize her, but this was the women's president of the Farmers Union at the time. We were making the point that the cap that the federal government had put on farm safety net programs was way too big. Nobody needed to get, no real farmer in our view needed to get $3 million from a safety net program. And we actually did some press conferences inside at the Parliamentary Press Gallery with Colleen wearing that hat. We were present in Mexico. This fellow's name was Zoelio, and he was showing us how to turn coffee berries into coffee beans. And we had a great visit with their group. But the one I really want to talk about and focus on a little bit as an example of how to change the conversation was being present in Hong Kong. And so it's 2005, and the World Trade talks are going. Tim Wise mentioned that yesterday. And this was the convention center. Kind of reminds me of the Starship Enterprise sticking out into the bay in Hong Kong. And again, this is what Colleen Ross looks like without that cap on. And the La Villa Campesina organizations were allowed to set up in a park called Victoria Park, which was probably a couple of kilometers away from the convention center. But it was really interesting the way things were set up there, and it was kind of a staging ground. When there would be a march towards the convention center, it would start in Victoria Park. Again, this is Colleen. We are This is before the tear gas came out, and we were there. And that's an interesting experience. There's probably other people in this room that know what tear gas smells like, but that's Colleen with kept wondering, how free is free trade when it's at the end of a machine gun? You know, is that really what we call free trade? And these fellows are not injured in any way. They're tired. And this is the next morning. And, you know, I just thought it kind of gives sort of a human look to the military side. I was a little nervous about taking a picture in case one of them woke up and was a little offended, but hey, it turned out to all be good. So how was the NFU present, and how did we change the conversation? So it all started on day one of the meeting. Colleen and I were part of the official Canadian delegation, NGO delegation, and so we were meeting every morning and every night with the Canadian officials in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. And this was the agricultural section. There was about 60 people at these meetings, including the minister, and they would be answering questions, and the trade negotiators, and they would answer questions that we were asking. But on day one, you have the opening ceremonies of the convention. Colleen and I, neither of us were remotely interested in going to the opening ceremonies and listening to a guy named Pascal Lamy talk about how good free trade was and how everybody had to be ambitious and we needed to do all this. So we sort of had a free afternoon because we just skipped it. So we went to the convention center, and just to go exploring. And there were parts of the convention center that we were allowed to go into, and sort of the other half was closed to the public. So we're basically wandering around there by ourselves. And there's a bulletin board, electronic bulletin board, and it says that Canada is having a press conference right now. And well, that can't be because the opening ceremonies are on. Well, but it's got a room number, and we don't have anything else to do. We wander around, we find this room. It's a big room. We open the door and look in. It's a great big room, kind of like a cafeteria, the way I remember it. And in a far, far corner, there's a little huddle of people. So we wander in very quietly and go down. And it's the Canadian Minister of Trade. And he is having a press conference. And there's a little group of reporters around him. And he is saying that all Canadian agricultural programming is on the table. They're really ready to negotiate everything. And this sounds really weird because it's not what they're saying at these delegation meetings in the morning and at night. It's not what they're saying anywhere else. So we listen to it and we don't know what to do. So when he gets up and leaves, we hand out our NFU cards to the reporters. We don't know who they are. And then we go out. He said. When he said we, he meant he, the Deputy Minister of Agriculture, and the Minister of Agriculture are at the opening ceremonies. They do not know that this press conference is happening. So I'm telling them what these guys were saying. And pretty soon my phone is ringing because it's the Minister of Agriculture through Wayne asking me what happened. What did they do? What did they say? What was going on? So this is not good. So when Colleen and I were down there behind the barricades, my phone rings again, and it's one of these reporters. And he wants to do an interview. So I go back into the building, and I'm talking to him, and he's a guy by the name of Cameron Duick. And so we have a long interview, and I have no idea who this guy is. He says he's a writer for the South China Morning Post. And yeah, okay, that's good. We talked for quite a while. And that's the end of it. And the next morning, we go back into the Canadian delegation meeting. And you know how sometimes you can walk into a room and you can feel kind of a tension in the room? And it wasn't all negative. There was some positive tension, but then our adversaries were very agitated. And on the seat of everybody's chair, there's a copy of the insert in the South China Morning Post. Turns out that they are the official record of the World Trade Talks. Fine. I open it up to see what's in there. Page 3, in the middle of the page, is this article, which I'm going to, right in the middle, I'm going to expand it a little bit. Canada ready to give away farm. This is the official record of the entire talks. So now you know this tension piece that was going on. Every other farm organization in there, well, so I'll talk about the article slightly. The lead is Canadian Trade Minister Jim Peterson willing to cut away at the financial support for Canadian agriculture. But then the article gives me the last 3 paragraphs, the National Farmers Union of Canada. Every farm organization in that room would have given their eye teeth to be mentioned in the official record of the World Trade Talks. Canada, on the other hand, wasn't all that happy about it. They canceled the rest of their press conferences for the ag sector for the whole week. They basically just kind of dropped off the table. And this is, this would not have happened without the NFU being present, just by the act of being there and putting forward the views of our organization and our membership. So the NFU can be present in a number of ways. And it really matters what the NFU says. Sometimes, anybody who doesn't agree with this, say, oh yeah, the NFU, they don't matter. There's, don't worry about it. Don't worry about what they say. And then sometimes we kind of take that on board and we think, well, maybe it doesn't matter what we say. We'll say something that's really outlandish. That's the wrong approach. It matters what we say. People read it. Politicians read it. They want to know. The importance of being present can't be overestimated. Now, we have the people, we've got the resources, we have our own act of parliament, which created the NFU, which is more important than people think. This is, a lot of us were up there the day before yesterday. Just the notion of taking a piece of legislation and getting politicians to pass that legislation to create your organization, we're unique. That's outstanding. That just doesn't happen every day. And that act of parliament tells us what to do, tells us what we can do, what we should be doing. And what I should be doing is wrapping up. But being present is job one. The analyzing, the research, the explaining, the convincing, the thinking long term, that's how we stay present. And other people, including Dean yesterday, talked about us being trailblazers. And, a lot of our adversaries 20 years from now will look back and come around and say, well, the NFU was kind of right about that. We just have to convince those people to jump on board sooner rather than later. They shouldn't be waiting 5 or 10 or 15 years to start to agree with us. And that's how we keep the future of farming in our hands. So, thank you.